thought it'd be amazing to go deeper because I know you come at this from a product focused angle. But hi, everybody. Great to see you all again. EJ Freni, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Claravine. Really happy to be here. I think with all the lines blurring between home, work, education, family, this is a topic that is top of mind for everybody. So at Claravine, we help some of the biggest brands in the world solve data integrity challenges through our platforms. And again, really excited to be here. And I'll hand it over to Hassan to do an intro before we kick off.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, EJ. First of all, this is my first Brand Innovators live fireside chat, so thank you for having me. And I joined the Brand Innovators community in February of this year, and I'm absolutely thrilled about being part of this community of well interested and diverse members of the branding community. So just a quick introduction for myself. I am Hassan Anjum. I lead the new computing product team for and new computing being both tablets and PCs at Samsung Electronics America. Just in a nutshell, my function is really two scopes I have. The first one is the traditional product planning piece, where we shape out the product portfolio of the next year or two for the U.S. market, and then the second piece is the traditional go-to-market piece, where we're optimizing for launch, firing on all cylinders, and making sure our consumers are really happy. So
awesome, awesome. So you guys just had a huge launch last week. You announced a new line of PCs. And this is a different environment than we've ever had to deal with, right? Typically, you'd be up on stage with thousands of people at a big venue somewhere around the world. How did you have to shift that whole mindset, Hassan? And what went into planning that? How do you launch a virtual event successfully?
yeah, I think one thing about 2020 we can agree is we're now digitally first, if you will. So everything's got to play that. One interesting fact in 2020, 50% of we announced PCs, to your point, but 50% of PCs bought in 2020 roughly were bought online. That is a massive shift in what we've seen in the past. So to your question about how we, in that spirit, how we went about announcing our products, and we've done it for different categories as well. So PCs, rightly so, we did a digital unpacking just last week. So it was pretty exciting for us, the reaction we got, and we had a huge partnership message with our friends at Microsoft and Intel as well. We announced Galaxy PCs really tailored to those folks, or with the same message of the Galaxy promise, if you will, the idea of mobility, continuity, and connectivity. So pretty exciting for us.
Great. Um, so with changes in announcing products, changes in events, changes in consumer behavior, what are some of the major trends that you're seeing that have shifted consumer behavior wise over the last year or post pandemic?
Yeah, I think this is quite obvious, but it's great to just say it out loud. One of the biggest things we saw last year is consumers, from a consumer electronics perspective, the intent to purchase, laptops and tablets were at the top, more than any other traditional categories you would think of. And obviously, demand and supply and prices and sales reflected that. People were buying them for work, people were buying them from home, people were buying them for their kids for education, and you couldn't get the devices. So that was the biggest trend for us from a consumer purchase perspective, and we really, obviously saw that and said, how do we continue to shape that portfolio to that promise of enabling you to do whatever you want wherever you are.
Yeah.
That was big, and then obviously the most obvious ones at home, the education piece, you interacting with your institutions on figuring out what makes sense, and then the other piece is powerful PCs to handle all the things that you do at work. So a lot of those common trends were there, and they sort of bubbled up. In fact, the most common thing that we saw consumers saying that they're doing with their electronic devices, guess what? Video chat. So, and that's something that changed drastically, um, quite a bit.
Yeah, so change is constant. It's ever constant in our world, obviously. I mean, the last year, I don't want to keep harping on this, but it's top of mind for every single business, right? There was just so much change. You said something really fascinating when we were catching up earlier about Samsung is the largest startup, right? I
Yeah.
think of Samsung, this huge innovative corporation. You have all this change last year. You talked about supply and demand issues. How do you pivot? How do you evolve? How do you do that at such a big company like Samsung?
Yeah, I think what Samsung's strength has always been one size doesn't fit all. So if you see the product portfolio that we generally offer, it is a combination of partnerships, solutions, offerings. So there's a certain product, certain solution you're thinking about, certain partner. Samsung has it. So I think that for us was the biggest strength that we brought to the table. So as this computing demand starts uh, exponentially growing, we pivoted and we said, okay, how do we expand that partnership? And you see portfolios with different partners expanding further. So, for example, premium portfolio for us grew quite extensively. And by premium, I mean by 700 and up. And Samsung is, yes, to me, the largest startup I've ever worked for. The ability to observe a trend, a consumer demand, being so passionate about consumers' needs and wants, and then being able to pivot and say, okay, what makes sense for us moving forward
We
at the
talked
speed
a
of
little.
light.
Yeah, we talked a little bit before this about how, and I mentioned this at the beginning, like the lines have blurred, right? Everybody in some way, shape, or form has been working from home. Those of us that are parents, or our kids at some point have been educated at home, or there's all this noise going on in home. How do you, as a brand, break through that? How do you produce brilliant engagement with your consumers in this world of noise right now?
Yeah, it's clear the lines have been blurring. But interestingly enough, in 2018, 2019, Samsung, we kind of predicted this idea of the future of work. The future of work is this previous notion of personal life and professional life is kind of changing. Everything is sort of blending together. We were on the right track. In that time, we were predicting, 50% of people would be working from home. In 2020, millennials, it was about 70% of millennials were actually working from home. And numbers are probably even more if you look at the general population. So one of the things we did with our PCs, especially at this recent launches, is we looked at an area that we do really well in, which is our smartphones. And smartphones, uh, what makes them really special is not only the ability that they're portable and are powerful enough to do whatever you want wherever you are. They're also connected, so you can actually have a connection wherever you are, a secure, dedicated connection. And that's why we announced PCs that will have 5G in them. So not only will you be connected and powerful at home, you're actually going to be able to be, where you're in a park or in an airport, when that happens, you'll be actually able to have a secure, dedicated connection. You're not sharing your credentials or your information on a public Wi-Fi. It's dedicated to you. So I think that for us was the biggest learning on taking. How do we evolve PCs to something that our smartphone heritage brings up?
Great. That's a perfect segue into the next question I was prepping to ask for you. So you've got a broad portfolio. Obviously, you focus on the PC line. You just talked about your handheld devices, your mobile devices. Big announcement last week, and I know this isn't in your purview, but or actually yesterday, about bespoke. In home, the Internet of Things, connected appliances. How do you think about delivering experiences across all of these devices in a uniform way, in a way that's engaging the consumer?
What's really interesting is, and I'm speaking from a tablets, PCs, smartphones, and even TV's perspective. One of the things we notice is there is so much interaction between these devices at home. People want to feel that there's a continuous experience between them. And why? Because we're consistently interchanging between these devices. So you're on your phone, you jot down a quick idea on your pen, but then when you open up your tablet or your PC, you actually expand on that. We've seen that kind of a behavior. And what we've seen is, while you're on the TV, again, this is obvious, but there's data on this. While you're on your TV, there's a thing called second screen. So you're on your phone or your tablet or your PC at the same time, maybe looking up related information or completely different. There is that information. So what we're consistently doing is finding those experiences that make sense for a user, that interchanges between them. So for example, we have a thing called screen. You can share your screen to your TV. So, whatever your phone content is, your tablet content, your PC content, you can actually project it onto a TV. Super seamless, just shared. The other piece is between your phone and your PC, Android and Windows, you can actually share your screen. You can actually use apps like Instagram, which is not a native desktop application, or WhatsApp or whatnot, and respond to that from both devices. So it's a multi-device experience. You can use your tablet as a second screen to your PC. So I think to answer your question, the desire for consumers is that continuous experience, and there's being part of Galaxy isn't only just taking the best of each category and you know broadening it across, but it's also having those Galaxy ecosystem conversations, if you will, experiences, regardless of the partnerships of the operating system. This is Galaxy.
How do you balance that, Hassan? So you have a company with such a broad portfolio, like you have the opportunity to interact at almost every digital touch point in a consumer's daily life, whether it's at home, work, entertainment, you name it. How do you balance when is enough, or when is too much for the consumer?
That's a I would say we're still not there yet. There's more consumers. At least our base is pretty passionate about ideas and how to create examples. And when I look at our roadmap, the inner device experiences are it's quite exciting. What lies ahead? Again, just a small one, being able to take a phone call on a PC. Leave your phone in your bag while you're in a cafe, and just answer a call and eject out. So there's a couple of things that are coming out in the future, I think, on the roadmap that are quite exciting. I think as we keep looking forward, and this is based on what the consumers sort of reactions are, things will get even more seamless. Like, for example, today you still have to accept a phone call, you still have to load the phone screen on your PC, you still have to hit the share button. I think you'll see a little bit more seamlessness coming forward. Like, you enter a room, to your point, Internet of Things. You enter a room, the algorithms already know, you have a desire to sort of show things on TV or things like that. I think you'll see those kind of elements start popping up in the future. The
Yeah.
seamlessness.
And
And this is the funny thing is the consumers want this.
I was just going to say that if there's one thing that every study shows, it's seamlessness, and from the dawn of time, it's been convenience, right?
Right.
Convenience. How can you help the consumer?
Yeah.
Well, as you develop some of these innovations, these new products, how do you take into account that devices are now probably going to be used across these shared spaces, work, life, play, education? Has that been a big thing that you've had to think about over the last year?
Yeah, we obviously want to enable our enterprise and B2B customers as well, and say, okay, what makes sense. But one thing we've noticed, especially from a tablets perspective, and this trend has stayed. So where is and from a price points perspective, the premium price points, what I mean by, let's say, 500 to 600 and up, usually become a my device. And then when you start looking at the lower, if you will, it becomes a we device. And again, it's quite obvious. Obviously, you walk into a carrier store, you buy a $0 tablet with your phone, or go into a place that buy a $50 tablet. It's likely for another purpose than you would go and buy a tablet for, let's say, work, or with a keyboard, or a little bit more of a premium device. So it's obvious, but there is data to show that behavior happens. Now, as we look towards the future, we see that bifurcation happening even more. So people will start saying, I want more and more from my devices, more and more from my operating systems, whatever operating systems they are. We want to enable the capability, and this is going to be my device. And the bifurcation is going to happen a little bit more. You're going to see prices probably stay the same, but that gap start widening. So in terms of capabilities, so I think the lower price products will be the shared products.
Mm.
The higher price products will be the my products. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. And I want to leave some time. There's some great questions in the chat that I'm going to come to in a second. I have a couple more that I want to ask you though before we get there.
Sure.
The first is there's so much innovation going on. What do you have your eye on? What are you focused on over the next 12 months? What excites you the most about digital innovation, product innovation?
Yeah. For me, I always talk about these three big trends that are happening. Everything's going to be connected. There's three pillars, and I've stuck to this message for a very long time. I'm glad that I feel that I'm on the right track. Everything's going to be connected. Everything, every single thing you can imagine will be connected, especially with the proliferation of 5G and whatnot. Because of that, you're going to see data being created like we've never seen before. We've never seen this type of amount of data. So imagine petabytes, not even terabytes, petabytes of data. The last piece is being able to synthesize and interact with that data. So being able to sort of interact with, so AR, VR, these are new ways to interact with data and get the relevant information. But to answer your question, the next 12 months is sort of the precursor to this first pillar, is the 5G. I think 5G is going to be big. And because we've announced it on PCs, no spoiler alerts, I can't do any of those, but I will say 5G is going to be a big message for us this year.
Great. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. I mean, data, right? That's all everybody. How do you control that or how do you try to organize that at a company like Samsung, where the portfolio is so large? There is so much data being created all the time.
I would say the good news and I go back to the strength of Samsung is we're not alone. We have partnerships with companies and friends who specialize in data. So we have ongoing conversations. And again, Samsung has its own database as well. But these partners basically, we share a lot of the data that makes sense on how we shape our portfolio moving forward. These are ongoing conversations that, we can talk about a hardware trend, we can talk about a software trend, we can talk about a data trend, we can talk about consumer preference trends. These are not done sort of alone in a silo. They're done with our partners. And whenever we shape a portfolio, case being the announcement we just had, it was a partnership message versus just a Samsung message. And I think that is going to be our strength as we keep moving forward in this realm.
Great. Before we get into the questions, I have one question that I always ask at the end of this. If you had one wish that you could change anything in the industry, what would that be? Whether it's to fix it, make it better, what would that be? Your one wish?
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I probably have a different answer when I think about it. But right off the top of my mind, I think one of the things we're really excited about these PCs, about this connected PCs, these 5G PCs, or these devices that are connected is, if you look at the past, ever since PCs were created, we're kind of trained to think of Wi-Fi PCs, and we have data to say, okay, 1 in 4 consumers are now saying, I want my PCs to be connected. I want it to have a secure, dedicated connection. So I guess to your point, what I would change in the industry, or what I would say is, if we all as the industry get behind and give the consumers really what they want, a secure, dedicated connection, PCs. It takes time, but if I would change things next day, I would say this could be a really important, critical innovation to meet consumer demands.
Great. Perfect.
I know I cheated a little bit. I kind of kept it on message, but hopefully that answers your question.
Totally okay. It did. And I completely caught you off guard on that. All right. So we've got some great questions from the audience, a lot of marketers in the audience, and everybody's gone through a ton of change over the last 18 months, right? First question is, has the crisis forced modifications to short-term, mid and long-term goals? And how do you measure success now based on these changes in consumer behavior?
Interestingly enough, when you look at the TAM, total addressable market for PCs and tablets, it went up obviously in 2021. But interestingly enough, one of the things we had an assumption was the demand pulled in, as in are people buying PCs today and saying I'm not going to buy it next year or the year after. Interestingly enough, most industry analysts and including us, we actually believe that's going to keep going. The trend is going to keep going, and what was going to drive that, in my opinion, is a traditionally stable market. The PC market, the TAM, has stayed relatively same. It propelled last year, and now there's a huge interest in the category. Huge, like everyone's looking at PCs. What can my PCs do for me? And they're exploring, because of last year, exploring maybe even different use cases. So what's going to happen in the next couple of years is you're going to see innovation in this category that you've not seen in a very long time. And I think that is sort of the driver for this growth. So to answer the question, the short-term, changes we saw was, the time increasing, and we keep projecting moving forward. Success for us is making sure we are addressing the revitalized interest in the consumers. I think for me, that is the biggest success in the next 1 or 2 years, and that the demand is going to be there.
Great. So similar question, are you adjusting your marketing and digital transformation initiatives or investment over the next two or 3 years based on last year, based on 2020?
Yeah, so I go back to the previous point, was the 50% of people who bought PCs, again, this has never been seen before, are buying it online. And we see that trend moving forward. I think what we used to see in the past was online reviews, and then you would go into, so I mean, I'm just summarizing at a very high level. Online reviews from a consumer journey perspective, online reviews, or interact on forums or whatever, discovery, and then you would kind of go into store and kind of experience it yourself, speak to the sales folks. And towards 2019, it kind of changed. You would go into a store and then maybe find the right price point and then maybe even buy it online. What happened in 2020, you would kind of do the whole journey online. So it would be online discovery, and then there's trust that this is fine enough for me, and you would just buy it. I think because of that, digital strategies should no longer be about buying ads, right? It's not about just buying ads and just putting it out there. It's about that whole experience, whether it's communities, whether it's online reviews with media, whatever it is, that going through that whole journey, that is what we're going to end up doing. So again, there's strategies in play, but for me, from a high level perspective, I see this common trend happening across all industries.
Great. What ways is Samsung working to stand out in the eye of the consumer? We've talked about this a little bit over the course of this conversation. So much clutter now. Everybody's at home. Everybody's trying to get mind share and eyeballs across the same devices. But how do you break free from that and create a differentiator for Samsung?
When consumers think of Samsung, when we look at the sort of metrics that people associate Samsung and Galaxy with, usually a couple of things pop up. Is this the innovation? Innovation and screen usually is one of them. And one of the strengths we have, and I keep going back to this, is we play with, we have a huge partnership message as well. But for me, if we go specifically to the PCs, we launched the world's first ever commercial 5G smartphone. Then last year we had the US's first tablet with a 5G. And this year, we're going to launch Samsung's first US 5G PC. So with that being said, that's the way Samsung's going to stand out, in my opinion, is this idea of innovation, changing it. When Samsung usually enters a category, in my opinion, at least at minimum, we change the consumer's expectations of what it is to be that category. So as we keep playing in these categories, you'll see more of that.
Great. The next question was about innovation. I think we touched on this. Tell us about new innovative ways your brand is connecting to consumers. I think we touched on that quite a bit. So I'm going to hop down to the next question.
Okay.
I'm always shocked when this doesn't come up, but there is so many changes in the digital ecosystem right now. Given the death of the third-party cookie, IDFA, the way that you're able to measure, target on mobile, How might you change your approach to targeting optimization and attribution over the next year or so? How are you thinking about that?
Besides these kind of data sources, the good news is we just don't rely on one source, right? There is multitudes of studies that we do, and we have owner insights and surveys and a pretty vocal audience, if you will. So for us to collect feedback is actually not difficult.
Mhm.
So we're actually pretty in tune to what the local consumers want and what they're looking for. And not only what they want, but what is their reaction to the current devices, current offerings as well. So there's multitudes of and I mean we can get into all of that, but there's a lot of data that we have to synthesize and go through. Um, Observing data is very just a one small pillar, if you will. We don't rely on one piece of data. Maybe I'll just put it that way. So
Yeah.
I have confidence as we continue building a portfolio, continue building a strategy, whether it's the marketing strategy, whether it's a product strategy, we have enough data to be able to synthesize it
Mhm.
and create those strategies.
Yeah, and I've got to imagine, for all the reasons you just said, the global footprint, the devices that you have proliferated everywhere, the amount of first party data that you have in the consumer is off the charts. Have you had
Off
to
the charts.
change the way that you collect that data or engage with the consumer around that data over the last year or so?
We, you know, I don't think we've changed too much in terms of our studies that we do in house or our communication we've had. Now obviously there are some studies that we are more digital focused versus, let's say, in person. I mean, those are kind of the elements there, I would say, has evolved. But if you look at our social platforms today, our audience is pretty vocal today, and it has only gone up, has not gone down. So um, whether it's social sentiments, consumer sentiments, online conversations, those may have evolved over the past year, but we were always sort of in place to monitor them. Does that make sense? Like we always had the systems in place to sort of watch, what those conversations are. So now it's just more about synthesizing more of that information.
Yeah, and I think one of the follow-up questions I was going to ask, if you answer, like, how do you, with such a breadth and depth of consumer interaction, how do you manage that at global scale? You have systems in place, you have teams in place to actually manage that interaction that's coming in from social, site directs, help, you name it. How do you do that at global scale?
Generally speaking, it is geographically based. So, for
Yeah.
example, the U.S. team sort of monitors the U.S. consumer sentiment, and then you've got the headquarters in Korea, a little bit of Korea, and then a little bit of here and there, and then you've got a European team, an Asian team. So we do that. Where the magic really happens is when you start synthesizing them all together and you start creating something really cool. So we do have continuous touch points in saying, okay, what is the commonality elements that we're seeing? And I think that is where the fun is, in my opinion. So managing that is again, we've done this in the past. So it's again, Samsung being a massive organization. It sounds really massive, but it's again going back to the small startup comment I made. Being able to bring all these teams together, that's where the fun is really.
Yeah, and that is such an important comment, and it comes up in virtually any webinar, any conversation I have. People are always fascinated by, well, how do you do that? How do you bring those teams together? Whether you're a large organization or you're, an organization of a couple hundred, and you're trying to figure out how to get different business units to talk. How do you do that at Samsung? How do you collaborate?
There's I don't want to use the word forced function, but it is sort of this. We have periodic get-togethers that no matter what, there's these time periods, whether you call them workshops, whether you call them global scale meetings, global kickoffs, whatever, those happen at a certain periods of time. You'll have representatives of each geographic location attend and present their geographic trends, needs, roadmaps, and things like that. But that's sort of the formality perspective. The informal perspective is surprisingly Samsung is quite connected. So, for example, I know the head of the Brazilian nuclear beam very well, and I know the European. I know the thing, and then this is at a it's not I'm not talking about an email basis. I'm talking about a phone video chat perspective basis. So for me, I think those are the elements. We tend to bring on folks that are very driven, and that in itself creates this um, connections between folks who are like-minded and aspiring to provide their consumers the best of the best. So you have a bit of formal and informal ways of connecting, if you
So you open up another question that I love to ask.
will.
Everybody, again, we've got this audience of marketers, a lot of senior level executives, incredibly busy. You're the proud father of 3 boys. I know you're focused on soccer. We're all always connected. What advice do you have to the audience about how to disconnect or how to balance this?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think the learnings we had part of this year was, frankly, um, connection overload. What I mean by that is being always on. And because we're all working from home, you almost don't know when to disconnect. So one of the things we implemented, and I would urge teams or individuals to do this, and it worked really well for me. So you can't see it. I don't know if everyone was doing, but before I put my background, I had a treadmill here. So I'm just going to point that out in just a bit. What we do as a team, my team specifically, is every day, every single day, one person in the team will book half an hour to an hour off. You're stepping away from your computer no matter what. And there's no cell phones, no phone calls, no meetings, no computer, no screen time. And everyone takes a turn to do it for the entire team. And I'm proud to say Samsung US is going to adopt this practice. So I do it on the weekends. Obviously, we don't do it on the weekend, but I do it. I say, okay, within this certain amount of time, I'm going to be doing I'm going to be going on the treadmill. I'm actually going to put my phone somewhere else. No TV, no nothing, and I'll just do that. So for me, what I would advise everyone to do, especially during the work days, figure out that 1 hour, half an hour, and no screen time. And I think it just mentally recharges you so well.
Awesome. Fantastic way to wrap. I see Lauren on. Hassan, I just wanted to thank you so much for the conversation.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Hassan, I can't believe this was your first time.
Well.
Yeah, you did fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, EJ, it's always great to have you. And
you
yeah, hopefully we can do this again soon, and
Absolutely.
have a great rest of your day.
Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye. All right, we're going to keep this show going. So I am excited to bring to the stage Rico Macrag. Rico is the SVP of Marketing at Simple Health, and he's joined by a very good friend of Brand Innovators, Jason Oates, the Chief Business Officer at Live Intent. Rico.